Tonight, I want you to sit back, turn off the lights, and listen closely, because what I'm about to share with you is not just a story. It's an experience, a journey into fear itself. This is The Shadow at My Window, a chilling tale of isolation, paranoia, and the kind of darkness that doesn't just live outside, but waits for the moment you dare to look. So, are you ready? Because once we begin, there's no turning back. Chapter 1. Moving in. The apartment was supposed to be my escape, a clean break, a chance to start over somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knew me. When I signed the lease, the building manager shook my hand with a grip that was far too tight, his smile stiff and unconvincing. I thought he was just awkward, maybe even relieved. After all, the unit had been vacant for months. That was what he told me anyway. It was late afternoon when I moved in, and the light slanted through the dusty hallway windows in a way that made everything look older than it probably was. The wallpaper in the corridor peeled in long, curling strips, like old scabs being picked at, but never removed. The smell was faint, mildew mixed with something metallic, maybe rust, maybe old blood from leaking pipes, though I tried not to let my imagination run away with me. My unit was on the 3rd floor, apartment 6B. Even the number felt strange. Why not 3B if it was on the 3rd floor? But the manager said the building was designed oddly, like half the floors didn't count. A quirk of architecture, he explained. I didn't press him. Inside, the place was small but livable. A cramped living room with a single cracked window, a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, and a bedroom barely big enough to fit my mattress. The walls were yellowed with time, but I told myself I could make it cozy. A lamp here, a rug there, some curtains to hide the cracked paint. I had been living out of boxes for weeks, and anything felt better than my friend's couch. I remember standing in the middle of that empty living room, listening. At first, all I heard was my own breath, uneven from carrying boxes up the stairs. But then I noticed the quiet. It wasn't normal quiet, not the kind you get in the suburbs or even in the countryside. It was heavy, oppressive, like the walls themselves were pressing in, swallowing up every sound I made. I laughed under my breath to chase the unease away. It's just an old building, I told myself. Old buildings creak. Old buildings settle. That's all, the radiator hissed suddenly, as if to argue. I jumped, then laughed again, nervously this time. By the time I finished unpacking the basics, it was dark outside. The street lamp outside my window buzzed faintly, casting pale orange light through the blinds. The glow cut the room into long stripes of shadow. My mattress lay directly on the floor. I hadn't gotten around to ordering a bed frame yet, and I sat on it, staring up at the ceiling. The ceiling was cracked, faint spider webs etched into plaster. But what unsettled me was how the shadows moved. Not quickly, not obviously, just enough that if you stared long enough, you could swear one of them had shifted an inch. I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket up. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window, every sigh of the pipes echoed louder than it should have. My ears strained to catch them, to place them. And then I heard it. A knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate sound like someone tapping a single knuckle against wood. I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. I waited, listening hard. Silence. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a pipe expanding. Maybe one of my boxes shifting. Maybe my neighbors. Though now that I thought about it, I hadn't heard a single voice or footstep since I moved in. Slowly, I lay back down. My heart thudded against my ribs, louder than the knock had been. I pulled the blanket higher until it nearly covered my face. My eyelids grew heavy, and just as I drifted off, I heard something else. A whisper, so faint I thought it was part of a dream. "Welcome." My eyes snapped open. The room was empty. The shadows stretched the same way they had before, but the word lingered, curling in the back of my skull like smoke. I didn't sleep much after that. Chapter 2. Whispers. The next day, I tried to shake it off. The strange knock, the faint whisper. Surely it was just the stress of moving, my brain playing tricks on me. I told myself that over and over while I unpacked dishes in the kitchen, stacking chipped plates into cabinets that smelled faintly of old grease and dust. But even in daylight, the apartment didn't feel normal. The silence wasn't gone. If anything, it was worse. When I set a plate down, the clink echoed far too long. When I opened a drawer, the squeak dragged unnaturally, like the sound was being stretched. I kept glancing at the window, but the world outside seemed muted too. Cars passed, but I didn't hear them. A dog barked faintly in the distance, but the sound was muffled, as if I were underwater. By evening, my nerves were raw. I sat in the living room, pretending to scroll on my phone, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway. The shadows there seemed thicker somehow, darker than the rest of the room, though no light bulb was out. I kept telling myself I'd buy more lamps, that it was just bad lighting. That night, I lay on the mattress again, staring at the ceiling cracks. I tried to distract myself, scrolling aimlessly, but the silence pressed heavier and heavier, like a weight on my chest. And then I heard it. Whispers, so faint I almost dismissed them. A low murmur, like voices speaking far away, just beyond the walls. I sat up, straining my ears. The radiator hissed, the window rattled slightly, and beneath it all, the whispers carried on. They weren't clear words, not at first, just shapes of sounds, syllables blending together. I couldn't tell if they came from the hallway, from upstairs, or from right inside the walls. I told myself neighbors. It had to be neighbors. Paper-thin walls, old pipes carrying sound from another unit. That was logical. That was sane. But the longer I listened, the less it sounded like any conversation. There were no pauses, no changes in tone, just a constant, steady stream, like a chant. I stood, every muscle tense, and stepped toward the door. My hand hovered over the knob. If it was neighbors, I could knock, ask them to quiet down. But then, all at once, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I stood there for what felt like hours, hand trembling just above the doorknob, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. Finally, I forced myself back to bed. My body felt drained, like the silence itself had taken something from me. When I finally drifted into shallow sleep, I dreamed of voices, dozens of them, surrounding me in the dark. They weren't angry. They weren't kind. They just repeated the same word over and over, in tones that seemed to crawl beneath my skin. Stay. When I woke, my throat was raw, as if I'd been whispering along. And on the wall above my mattress, scratched faintly into the peeling paint, was a word I hadn't written. Stay. Chapter 3. The Window. The third night was colder. Not in temperature, at least not the kind you could measure with a thermostat. This was something else, a kind of chill that clung to the skin and sank deeper, like it came from the walls themselves. I had told myself that the whispers were just my imagination, just stress. I had even laughed about it the next morning. though my throat still burned with the memory of that single word scratched into the wall. Stay. I tried to ignore it. I even pulled a poster out of one of my boxes and tacked it over the faint letters, covering them up like they had never been there. Out of sight, out of mind. That's what people say. But by the time the sun set, that uneasy weight was back in the apartment, heavier than before. I sat in the living room trying to watch something on my phone to distract myself, but the silence in the apartment was louder than anything coming from the screen. It pressed against me until I turned the volume all the way up, and still it didn't seem to fill the space. When I finally turned everything off and crawled onto the mattress, the shadows felt thicker, the air felt heavier, and my body felt like it was sinking into the floor. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. My gaze drifted again and again to the single cracked window across from me. The window bothered me more than anything else in that apartment. The glass was warped, old enough that it didn't quite reflect properly. Sometimes it shimmered faintly, as though it was breathing with the night air. I told myself it was just the street light outside, but I never quite believed it. That night, the blinds rattled softly, just once. I froze, my body stiff under the blanket. It was just the wind, I thought, just the wind. But the street outside was quiet, too quiet. The blinds swayed again, gently. I sat up slowly, heart hammering. My phone's screen glowed faintly on the mattress beside me, and for a moment I thought about using the flashlight, but something inside me resisted, as if shining a light would make it worse, as if it would invite whatever was out there. I told myself not to look. I told myself to lie back down, to close my eyes, to ignore it. But the longer I waited, the stronger the pull became, like the window itself was demanding my attention. Finally, I turned my head. Through the blinds, I saw the faintest hint of movement. Just a shadow, I told myself. Just a tree branch swaying outside. But there were no trees near the building. I knew that. The movement came again, a darker patch within the darkness, sliding slowly across the glass. I sat completely still, barely breathing. And then I heard it. Tap. Soft, deliberate. A single fingertip against the glass. My throat tightened. My body wanted to move, but I couldn't. My muscles locked as if something in the air held me down. Another tap. Louder this time. The blinds shifted slightly, though no breeze touched my skin. I forced myself to move, to crawl across the mattress and stand on shaking legs. Step by step, I approached the window. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. When I reached the blinds, I hesitated. My hand hovered just above the cord, trembling so hard it made the blinds rattle softly on their own. I told myself, pull them. Just pull them. See for yourself. Nothing's there. But my body screamed at me not to. I waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. My breath fogged faintly in the cold air, though the heat was on. Then, suddenly, the blinds shifted on their own. Just slightly, as if something brushed them from the other side. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the mattress. My phone slid off and clattered to the floor, its light flashing across the ceiling. When I looked up again, the blinds were perfectly still. The silence returned, but my pulse wouldn't slow. I sat there on the floor, staring at the window, waiting for something else to happen. Minutes passed and nothing did. The room stayed still, the blinds unmoving, the glass quiet. Finally, I crawled back onto the mattress, dragging the blanket over myself. My eyes stayed locked on the window, though every muscle in my body begged me to look away. Sleep came in fragments, broken and shallow. I don't know how long I drifted before I woke again to the faint sound. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks this time. Clearer, closer. I froze, eyes wide open, staring at the blinds. The tapping had been soft, but unmistakable. And then, through the blinds, I saw it. A shadow. Not just movement this time, but a shape. A figure standing just beyond the glass. My heart nearly stopped. I couldn't make out details, only the outline. Tall, thin, head tilted slightly as though it were watching me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Minutes stretched like hours. My eyes burned, but I didn't dare blink. And then, slowly, the shadow leaned closer. The blinds bulged inward, just slightly, as though pressed by an unseen face. And then, silence. The shadow was gone. I lay there trembling, clutching the blanket so hard my knuckles ached. I waited for the taps to return, for the blinds to move again, for anything. But nothing happened. Finally, exhaustion dragged me down. My eyes closed against my will, my body surrendering even as my mind screamed to stay awake. In my dreams, I saw the window again, but this time there was no glass, only a darkness that reached through, spilling into the room like smoke. And in that darkness, 2 pale eyes opened, watching, always watching. Chapter 4. The Journal. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the cracked window, spilling across the floor in thin lines. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. The light didn't feel warm. It felt faded, like the day itself was reluctant to step fully into the apartment. I sat on the edge of the mattress, exhausted. My body ached from lying on springs too thin to cushion me. But worse than that was the weight behind my eyes. I hadn't really slept, not the way a person should. I had closed my eyes, sure, but dreams had dragged me through a place darker than the room itself. The window haunted me even in daylight. The blinds hung limp, motionless, but I couldn't look at them without remembering the shadow, tall, still, watching. I thought about leaving, about grabbing what little I had and never coming back. But the idea was laughable. I had signed the lease. I had no money for another place. And something deeper, something I didn't want to admit, kept me here. It wasn't just fear, it was curiosity. That apartment was wrong, and a part of me wanted to know why. I spent the afternoon unpacking boxes, anything to keep myself moving. Most of the boxes held nothing important, old clothes, dishes, a few books. But near the back of the closet, half buried under a pile of yellowing newspapers, I found something I hadn't put there. A book. No, not a book, a journal. Its cover was cracked, the leather worn thin like it had been handled too many times. Dust clung to it, coating the spine in a gray film. My fingers hesitated before touching it. When I finally lifted it out, I felt a strange resistance, like the air itself grew heavier. I carried it to the mattress and sat cross-legged, placing the journal on my lap. For a long time, I just stared at it. My gut told me not to open it. My mind screamed that I shouldn't, but my hands didn't listen. The first page was blank, so was the second. But by the third, ink appeared. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, like it had been scratched in a rush. It watches from the window. I froze, my throat tightening. I flipped further. It knows when you look. Don't look. Don't let it know you see. The next line had been written over and over again until the page nearly tore. Stay, stay, stay. My pulse thundered in my ears. I closed the journal, hands trembling. For a moment, I considered shoving it back into the closet, burying it again under the papers. But I couldn't. I had to know more. I forced myself to keep reading. Some entries were short, nothing more than a single line. It tapped again tonight. It moved the blinds. It leaned closer. Others rambled, the words almost frantic, as if the writer was losing their grip. It never blinks. I blink and it moves closer. I turn my head and it waits. It is patient, more patient than I am. The later pages grew worse. Dark stains smudged the ink, water damage, or maybe something else. Some pages were nearly illegible, the words overlapping each other in desperate scratches. But one entry stood out. It was longer than the rest, clearer, almost deliberate. If you're reading this, it means you've seen it too. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't answer the knocks. Don't pull the blinds. And whatever you do, don't write back. I stared at those words until they blurred. Write back. The journal slipped from my hands and fell open to the last page. My breath caught in my throat because the final page wasn't old. It was new. The ink was fresh, still glistening faintly in the dim light, and the words were written in neat, sharp letters. Hello? I slammed the journal shut, heart racing so violently I thought my chest would split. I dropped it on the floor and stumbled back until I hit the wall, eyes wide, staring. The journal lay there, quiet, innocent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for me. The rest of the day blurred. I couldn't focus on anything. I paced the apartment, checked my phone again and again, though no messages came. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the faint rattle of pipes. And always, my gaze drifted back to the journal. By nightfall, the air felt different, heavy, almost charged, like before a storm. I tried to ignore it. I tried to lie down, to close my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, I heard it. Tap, the window. My chest tightened. Tap, tap. I clutched the blanket, pulling it tight around me. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. I turned my head toward the window. The blinds hung still, but the sound had been real. Too real. And then, from the floor beside the mattress, the journal slid an inch. I froze. It hadn't been near the edge. There was no slope, no reason it should have moved. But it had. My hands shook as I reached for it. The leather felt colder than before, almost wet. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The last page had changed. The word hello was still there. But beneath it, in fresh, wet ink, was something new. Write back. I dropped the journal as if it had burned me. My chest heaved, my mind racing. The tapping at the window grew louder, faster, more insistent. Tap, 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 tap. And then, silence. I sat there, trembling, staring at the blinds, waiting for the shadow to appear. But nothing moved. Instead, I glanced back at the journal. Its pages fluttered, slowly, deliberately, though no air stirred the room. It opened itself to the last page, and this time the ink wrote itself, letter by letter, stroke by stroke. We know you're awake. My blood ran cold. The blinds rattled once, sharp and violent, and then everything went still. Chapter 5. The reflection morning light crept weakly into the apartment, yet it didn't feel like morning. The air was stale, heavy, as though the walls themselves held their breath. I sat hunched on the mattress, eyes fixed on the journal lying in the corner where I'd shoved it the night before. I hadn't slept again. My mind replayed the words over and over. We know you're awake. The ink, the movement, the impossible way the letters formed. My brain tried to deny it, tried to find an explanation. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was twisting everything. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew something in this place was real, and it was watching. I avoided the journal all morning. I tried to busy myself, unpacking boxes, scrubbing the kitchen counters, anything to feel normal. But no matter what I did, I felt eyes on me. Not from the window this time, from inside, from somewhere I couldn't place. It wasn't until I went into the bathroom that I understood. The bathroom was tiny, barely big enough to move. The mirror above the sink was spotted, edges tarnished with age. But when I lifted my head to wash my face, my reflection made me pause. I looked off. Not wrong exactly, not at first glance, but something subtle. My eyes seemed a shade too dark, my mouth a fraction too slow to close when I stopped moving. My reflection felt delayed, as though it was following me rather than mimicking me. I leaned closer, squinting. The mirror was warped, I told myself, old glass, uneven silvering. That was all. But when I tilted my head to the right, just slightly, the reflection didn't move. I froze. My chest tightened, breath caught. I jerked my head back to center, and the reflection corrected itself instantly, as though nothing had happened. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring, daring it to slip again. My reflection stared back, patient. Finally, I splashed water on my face, gripping the edges of the sink to stop my hands from shaking. When I looked back up, my reflection smiled. I didn't. My legs nearly gave out. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall hard enough to rattle the towel rack. My reflection had returned to normal, but I knew what I'd seen. The smile hadn't been mine. I left the bathroom door open after that. I couldn't bring myself to be in there with the mirror closed off, not with the door between us. That night, sleep taunted me. I lay awake, listening to the silence, the weight of it pressing down until I could barely breathe. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak deliberate. The blind shifted once, though the window was closed tight. I tried to close my eyes, but the image of that smile burned behind my eyelids. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. Not the tapping this time. Something softer, a whisper. It wasn't coming from the hallway, not from the journal. It was coming from the bathroom. I sat up, pulse thundering. The bathroom door stood ajar, the darkness inside heavy and still. The whisper was faint, just at the edge of hearing, like lips brushing against glass. I forced myself to my feet. My legs felt numb as I crossed the floor, step by step, until I stood at the doorway. The whisper stopped. The mirror was visible from here, a dull rectangle in the dark. My reflection waited inside it, faint in the low light. I leaned forward slowly, heart pounding, trying to see. My reflection leaned closer too. I exhaled, shaky, trying to convince myself it was fine. It was just me. Then, as I turned to leave, movement caught my eye. My reflection didn't turn. It kept watching me. I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut, heart hammering so violently it made my vision blur. For the rest of the night, I sat on the mattress with my back against the wall, staring at the closed bathroom door. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. When morning finally came, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation, stress, bad lighting, that was all. But deep down, I knew. The journal, the window, and now the mirror. The apartment wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it wanted me to see. Chapter 6. The knock at the door. Night fell heavier than usual, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I sat on the mattress, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the journal, the mirror, the blinds, all the silent watchers of my life now. Every object in this apartment had become an accomplice. I kept the lights on, though their glow felt weak. barely pushing back the shadows. The corners of the room seemed deeper than they should have been, like they led somewhere I couldn't see. The silence was unbearable. Every breath sounded too loud, every heartbeat like a drum. I told myself not to listen, not to wait, but I knew what was coming. It always came. The first knock rattled through the apartment like a gunshot. Bang. Not the window this time, not the walls. The front door. My chest tightened. I froze, every muscle tensed, waiting for it to come again. It did. Bang. Bang. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, sticky, like it resisted my lungs. I stared down the hallway toward the door, my vision tunneling. No one should be here. No one knew me. No one had reason to knock. And yet, bang. The sound reverberated, vibrating the floor beneath me. I stood, legs trembling, and took a step toward the hallway. The journal slid half an inch across the floor, as though urging me on. Another step. The bathroom mirror creaked faintly, as if settling in its frame. My reflection waited there, watching from the corner of my eye. Another step. The blinds at the window shifted, though there was no wind. A shadow flickered against them, tall, unmoving. The entire apartment seemed alive, pushing me forward, guiding me toward the door. I stopped just a few feet away. My hand hovered near the knob, fingers trembling. The silence after the last knock was suffocating. Whoever or whatever was out there wasn't leaving. It was waiting. And then, faintly through the wood, a whisper. "We're here." My blood froze. Not "I'm here." "We." I stumbled back, heart hammering. My mouth was dry, my skin clammy. The journal snapped open behind me, its pages fluttering as if caught in a storm. I turned and saw words etching themselves in fresh ink. "Answer." The mirror groaned. My reflection pressed its hands against the glass, palms flat, as though urging me on. The blinds rattled violently, the shadow swelling larger, darker. And the door, bang, bang, bang. The pounding shook the frame, dust raining from the ceiling. "Let us in." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clear, close, too close, as if it was already inside. My vision blurred, my knees weakened. I gripped the wall to keep from collapsing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, but there was nowhere left. The apartment had become a cage, and every corner was filled. I staggered back toward the mattress, covering my ears, but the knocks didn't stop. They came again and again, steady, patient, shaking me with each one. The journal's ink scrawled faster now, covering entire pages in jagged letters. "Answer, answer, answer." The mirror cracked, a thin line running down the center. My reflection smiled through the break, eyes dark, teeth too sharp. The blinds tore slightly, fabric peeling, and through the gap I saw movement. Not one shadow, many. And the door, bang. So loud this time it rattled the entire apartment. I screamed, voice raw, echoing against the silence that followed. For the first time since I'd moved in, everything stopped. The journal stilled, the mirror quieted, the blinds fell limp, and the door was silent. I sat on the floor, shaking, my breath ragged, waiting. Seconds stretched into minutes, maybe hours, and then a single final knock, soft, gentle, like a friend. "Tomorrow," the whisper said, almost tender. The air grew still. The door remained closed, but I knew. Tomorrow I wouldn't be given a choice. Chapter 7. The last night. The sun set without ceremony. One moment, a dull gray glow lingered at the window. The next, it was gone, swallowed by a darkness that felt deeper than any night before. I sat on the mattress, numb, waiting. My body was drained, my mind frayed, but sleep was impossible. Every nerve buzzed with the memory of the knock, the whisper, tomorrow. And now, tomorrow was here. The apartment breathed around me. I could feel it. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins carrying something unseen. The floor groaned not from age, but from strain, as though something pressed against it from below. The journal lay open at my side. I hadn't touched it, but fresh ink stained the page regardless. Midnight. The mirror in the bathroom was cracked down the middle, the fracture cutting my reflection in half. Both sides stared at me, eyes unblinking, lips curled into mismatched smiles. The blinds at the window swayed, though no air stirred. Behind them, shadows shifted, too many to count. And the door, silent, waiting. I checked the clock on my phone, 11:47. Every second dragged, heavy, deliberate. I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, then stopped, then paced again. My heartbeat didn't match the time. It stuttered, frantic, out of rhythm. At 11:59, the lights flickered, once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the apartment. My phone screen glowed faintly in my trembling hand. The clock ticked over, 12 o'clock, midnight. The first knock came instantly. Bang! The door shuddered in its frame. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Bang! Bang! 3 knocks, the same rhythm as always, but heavier now. Final. I clutched the phone tighter, its glow casting a weak circle of light. My breath came in sharp gasps. The journal's pages flipped violently, whipping back and forth until they landed on the last page. New words etched themselves in thick black strokes. Open. The mirror screeched as cracks spread across it, splintering my reflection into a dozen distorted fragments. Each one grinned, too wide, too eager. The blinds tore free of their brackets, collapsing to the floor. The window was bare now, and through the glass, shapes, dozens, maybe hundreds, human-like but wrong, pressed close against the pane, their heads tilting in unison, their eyes pale and endless. I staggered back, colliding with the wall, phone shaking in my grip. The shadows outside didn't move closer, but I felt them pressing in, squeezing the air from the room. And the door, bang, bang, bang. The sound thundered through my skull. My vision swam. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The whisper seeped through the wood, no longer faint. Let us in. My knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, hands clutching my head. Every sound screamed at me. Every object demanded obedience. The journal, open. The mirror, grinning faces pressing against the glass. The window, shadows writhing, mouths opening in silent hunger. The door, bang, bang, bang. I couldn't escape. There was no escape. We're here, the whisper said, louder now, overlapping voices filling every corner. I crawled to the mattress, grabbing the journal, desperate for answers. My tears blurred the ink, but new words carved themselves anyway, sinking deep into the paper. One way out. My shaking hands flipped to the next page, blank. Then ink bled across it, slow and deliberate. Join us, I screamed, hurling the journal across the room. It struck the mirror, shattering it completely. Shards rained onto the floor, scattering reflections in every direction. In each shard, I saw myself, but not me. Dozens of versions, smiling, whispering, eyes hollow. The window cracked. Thin lines spread across the glass, webbing outward. The shapes outside pressed closer, their faces stretching, skin pale and thin as paper. The door handle turned. Slowly, quietly. I froze, staring. It rattled once, then twisted again. I couldn't move, couldn't think. And then, with a sound like splitting bone, the door burst inward. Darkness poured through, Not shadows, not figures, but something heavier, thicker, swallowing light itself. I stumbled back, falling onto the mattress, phone clattering from my hand. The glow died instantly, consumed by the black. The voices filled the room. Not whispers now, shouts, screams, 1,000 tongues speaking as one. Stay, stay, stay. The journal's pages tore themselves free, flying into the air, circling me like birds. Each one bore the same word, scrawled in frantic ink. Stay. The shards of the mirror vibrated on the floor, each reflection mouthing the word in unison. The shadows from the window spilled inside, merging with the darkness from the door, filling every inch of the room until there was nowhere left to hide. I felt them touch me. Cold, endless, seeping into my skin, my bones, my mind. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came. The last thing I saw was my reflection, hovering in the largest shard of glass. It wasn't screaming, it was smiling. And then, nothing. When the landlord entered weeks later, the apartment was empty. The mattress remained, the broken mirror, the torn blinds. And in the center of the room, lying open on the floor, was the journal. Its final page held just 2 words, written in fresh ink. Welcome home. Thanks for watching.